Well, thanks for making time for PM Express. A budget going nowhere. That is how the minority has christened the government's 2013 budget statement. Looking austere, Ghanaians appear to be heading towards paying more taxes to fund the government's ambitious intervention programs as the public debt sprints like Usain Bolt, almost 6% taller than the projected in 2012. As fears of going epic heightens, the government has announced a rigorous domestic revenue mobilization drive to stem the rising debt stock. Meanwhile, Setekpe, the finance minister, has pointed out specifically what contributed to the tripled budget deficit. Among them, he mentions shortfalls in corporate income taxes, notably from the petroleum sector of about 708 million, or 1% of GDP. And then he spoke about shortfalls in grants from development partners amounting to about 389.4 million, or approximately 0.5% of GDP. The implementation of the single spine salary structure, which has gone, he claims, has gone in excess of about 1.91 billion, or 2.7% of GDP. Tonight, we're asking the very tough questions. Is it a case of fiscal indiscipline? Do we as a country have money to survive for the next 4 years? Are we, or are the seemingly austerity measures necessary? Are they necessary? You can join us by text 1760 or post your comments on our Facebook or facebook.com/joynews. If you are active on Twitter, you can send us a tweet. Our handle is Joy News on TV. I have with me in the studio, to my immediate left, Sydney Casely Hayford. He's a financial analyst. And then next to him, I have James Kluche Afeti, who is chairman of the Finance Committee of Parliament. He is the NDC MP for K2 North. And then I have Dr. Akutose, who is MPP spokesperson on finance and MP for Old Tafo Pankrono. Gentlemen, tonight is budget night. We're going to brainstorm on the budget. So let me start with Dr. Akutose. Budget's going nowhere. And you have described it as public debt sprinting like Usain Bolt. Where does the minority stand on this?
Well, first, let me say a good evening to your viewers. This is the first time I'm coming on this program, so I haven't been watching it. So,
you're welcome.
Thank you very much for inviting me. First of all, I listened, I think it's about 2 hours that the minister, 1.5, close to 2 hours, that the minister had a chance to read a budget statement. I had a few observations. One, maybe as a matter of his style, but it didn't generate a lot of excitement on the floor of the House, even on both sides. But maybe it's a matter of style. Two, especially because we had put out what we call the true state of the nation, I was hoping that he would respond to some of those matters. The document that I have in front of me is supposed to be the highlights of what he read. I was not excited, and I sympathize with him. The minister is my friend, but I think as a deputy minister, he was part of a system that got us to where we are. And as I said, I was expecting that he would look the president in the face and say, Mr. President, the better Ghana agenda is gone bitter. So allow me to do what is necessary so that we can get back on track. I did not hear it. Question, is he hedging now for us to look at the details when he comes back? Because I heard a lot about resource mobilization, revenue mobilization. What does that mean? When you are trying to move from a deficit of 12 point, now here even I'm surprised that the Bank of Ghana tells us it's 12.1, the Ministry of Finance tells us it's 12.0. I don't think there should be a time where government agencies should differ on the exact amount. People will say 0.1 is not big, but 0.1 of 79 billion is a lot of money. So we should not be disagreeing on the numbers. The document talks about 12.0. Bank of Ghana's statement, which I have in front of me, talks about 12.1. That should not happen. Assuming that somebody is making a mistake, he wants to get from 12.0 to 9% of GDP. the 9% of GDP of the 2013 GDP is obviously a higher base. What does it take to achieve these savings? 1, revenue mobilization. 2, expenditure cuts. This document that I have, I don't see where the savings is coming from. You know, what is interesting is that in his statement, he tells us what happened in 2012 by saying that he can identify 5.5% of the 1% or 12%. So where is the excess 6.5% of the deficit coming from? I maintain, and I still do so, that is excessive expending over last year. We have put out information that the Office of the President spent over 600 million cedis above their budget. Ministry of Youth and Sport spent over 300 million cedis over their budget. There are several government ministries and department agencies. What is interesting, my host, is that we have a constitutional problem. And Parliament must begin to ask itself, why are we in Parliament? Why do I say that? Between the Appropriations Act and the supplementary budget, all Parliament approved was 21 billion cedis. The government has spent 25 billion. 25. We have breached both the Appropriations Act and the supplementary budget. What do? I maintain that before we even look at the 2013 budget, Parliament should be asking ourselves, so if we spent all these weeks making an approval and any government can exceed it, then why do we say we have an oversight responsibility? So the very first question I'm going to ask Parliament is, shouldn't we be having an Appropriations Act that specifies sanctions for breaching the Act?
So you think this budget statement is visionless and empty?
I'm coming to what has happened. I've been speaking about what has happened. That government, the executive has violated the authority of Parliament. What do? Because in looking at the 2013 budget, which we are the only ones that are allowed to approve, if we don't deal with what has happened earlier, then why are we spending time looking at it? Because then we are wasting our time. So Parliament as an institution must ask itself, what is our authority? Why do we have an Appropriations Act that ends up being breached and we want to pretend that we are approving the budget? That is a very fundamental question. Now, as I said, I don't see the kinds of things that, at least it is not in the document I have. And I only have the highlights. I'm hoping that when I get the main document, I may see initiatives that will convince me that reducing the deficit from 12 to 9% is doable. Because see, some of these mishaps that occurred in 2012, it was predictable. We knew that the corporate tax that we're expecting from the oil companies was not going to happen. We knew that non-tax revenue, which had been projected at, and here I even worry. Bank of Ghana says it's 2.2 billion. The ministry says it's 2.8 billion. What are we talking about? We said at that time that, look, don't put in fictitious numbers. It will come back to haunt you. Grants, we're expecting 1.7 billion. Then they said, oh, we fell short. In economics, there's no free lunch. Well,
thanks, Dr. Akotose. Let me come to you, Honorable Kluche Aveji. I saw you smiling. I mean, so you disagree that a lot of the things that are predictable mishaps, like Dr. Akotose is saying?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Good evening to our listeners. I think that Doc naturally wouldn't have praised this budget.
And you naturally will praise it.
But I think that one thing that I'm happy with in this budget is that the budget gives us all the facts, all the factual situation that we have today as a country. But let me just react briefly to some of the points that he raised.
We'd be grateful if you could speak out louder.
Yeah. First of all, he mentioned that the style of the presentation of the minister make it not very exciting on the floor.
He was sleeping.
I wasn't sleeping. In fact, members were paying attention to the details of what the minister was reading to us. In fact, and I believe strongly that because the minister is a very nice guy, all the minority side like him. So they didn't want to heckle him. So you could see from the floor that they were not even heckling him at all. So I'll not agree with him that the presentation was a style, therefore there was no excitement. There was a lot of excitement. Now, again, my colleague talked about he did not see in the budget what measures that the minister will put in place in order to reduce the deficits. But I think that the minister mentioned one very important point about the single spine salary scheme, the implementation period, which initially was supposed to be for 5 years. And it was maybe decided by government, maybe due to the pressure from labor, government decided to pay their arrears within 2 years. That put a lot of pressure on the expenditure side of the budget. That was why about 2.7% of GDP was overspent. And the minister said that we'll go back to the white paper of government for 5-year implementation period of the single spine salary structure. So that is one of the measures that could ease the pressure on the expenditure side of the budget. Then when you come to the revenue side, now if you read the highlights, which I have, or which was read by the minister, you will not see clearly, apart from the various tax items, some of which are even to the benefit of Ghanaians in terms of increase in the threshold of the VAT from 90,000 to 120,000. Ghanaians are going to benefit from that. Apart from those ones, the minister was clear that during the course of the year, he is going to come to the House with revenue bills, revenue administration bill, VAT bill, internal revenue bill, that's income tax bill, custom bill, and then the excise bill. All these bills are coming to the House. We'll then see the specific of these bills and then how revenue can be enhanced from this area. So everything is in the budget. So that is what I see the minister.
So for you, I mean, what are the key indicators that are captured in the budget which obviously you are happy with? I mean, what are the key indicators so that you could point us to ABC and then we could refer to it as indicators you're happy about?
Yeah, I think I've mentioned them already, but maybe in a different context. The revenue bills that are coming to the House, I'm happy that all these bills are coming to the House. Now, if you look at the reason for the overspending, where we have a shortfall in terms of corporate tax. So you do
concede that they're being overspending. I mean, government has
because
overspent beyond its own estimates and attributes for a period.
No, there was one thing that my colleague mentioned in terms of the corporate tax. That the government, he said they knew that there will not be any revenue raised from corporate tax to that magnitude. But he has forgotten that the government did bring to the House the income tax amendment bill, which Parliament failed to pass because the income tax of 2000 did not take account of oil-producing companies at the time that law was passed. So when Ghana started producing oil, and then we have this company like Tullow and the rest, they brought the bill amendment to the House for us to pass, and we are not able to pass it. That is why there was a shortfall in the tax revenue. So if the revenue bills are now coming, we take account of the current situation that we have now, and that will ensure that we raise more revenue. So I'm happy with that those revenue bills are coming.
Okay.
Yeah. Then if we come to the expenditure side, again, to ease the pressure on government spending, the single spine implementation will then go back to the 5-year implementation period so that you will not put too much pressure on the expenditure. That workers, in this case, workers must agree with government that looking at the pressure that we have in the implementation of the single spine, we will wait for you to spread the payment of the arrears over a 5-year period. Then everybody can be covered, and then the government can also bring the deficit to 9% as we have in the budget.
Okay, so let me shift to you, Sydney Caseley-Hereford. It's great to have you. We've not been on the show for a while this year. Now, government is attributing this overspending to what it terms rising debt stock, and then to shortfalls in corporate taxes, and then shortfalls in grants from development partners. Is this satisfactory to you?
It's a personal opinion if I'm to say satisfactory or not. But the question really should be, is it factual? Is it real? Is that the way it actually happened? We are shortchanged as public because we do not get access to information which parliamentarians are privy to. And for those of us who are trying to understand and analyze and explain numbers, it's a challenge when you're trying to get behind numbers. Let me answer your question in a different way. Government says that it run a deficit, it shortfell by about 7 billion. It overspent by about 7 billion.
Yeah.
8.7 billion. The revenues didn't come up to par. The corporate taxes failed. Mining royalties looks like they held, because that's one of the highlights that he later explains in the budget, that he actually thought that the mineral royalties and the mining sector had actually shored up and cushioned some of the pain. And then he talks about the single spine implementation. He talks about the currency depreciation, all of those being contributory factors to the overruns. And I think that Akoto makes a very, very great point when he says that how do you actually go ahead and overspend to that limit without coming to Parliament and asking for a review of your expenditure levels in order to be able to get permission to go ahead and spend. And the big question then becomes, where did the money come from? If he didn't meet his revenue targets, then how come? Because even the donor targets were shortchanged by about 339 million. If that be the case, where did the money come from for the overruns? It could probably have come from capital expenditures, and you could have said, okay, so we borrowed some money from particular arenas and we used it, but the money that we were supposed to have spent, which is the Chinese Development Bank facility, has not actually been spent yet. We are actually in the phase now. We are saying that we would have the gas processing plant ready by, I think it says the third quarter of 2013. Is when we expect the gas processing plant to be ready. We're supposed to have spent $800 million on that already with Sinopec, the Chinese partner, developing the gas processing plant, which has not come on stream. Yeah. So I am reading it now, and yes, we do have a certain amount of detail, but I'm finding it very complicated to unravel the numbers and to explain to myself and to anybody who will listen to me exactly where and how we managed to overrun so high. Because in my mind, the cedi depreciated between January and June or May. I think it was up to June, July, thereabouts? The first 7 months of the year. Currency depreciated very fast.
I mean, so it means that, it means that these fiscal slippage for 2012, the reasons for them, you're not really excited.
I can't
You're not really. They're not really clear.
I can't see it at all.
Government tells us they borrowed from the domestic markets over 7 billion. Period. 7 billion cedis. That is what it is here.
Yes, that is what
to support the
excess. And they also go ahead to say that most of that domestic borrowing came from the central bank.
No,
Yeah.
31%.
32.
Came from the central bank.
Yes.
31, 32. Which one is that?
31.7.
31, roughly 32.
Okay, so 32% came from the central bank, and the rest of it came from public borrowing.
Yes.
At a high interest cost.
So really, I mean,
That's
my critical question that
year
everybody would like to know is that, I mean, with all these concessions, I mean, I agree that if I look at the portions where the minister expressly conceded of these fiscal slippage, shortfalls in corporate tax, shortfall in grants, implementation of single spine, highest interest rate, utility and fuel subsidies. I mean, what could have been done different?
But that's the issue I raised. If you add all those reasons that government is saying, you only account for 5.5%.
Yeah.
And it's 12.1.
But Doc, I think that
if I can land.
I just want to come up with this point. The figure that was given to us as the percentage of GDP that is going to be the overrun was 6.7. Now this figure has grown to 12.9.
No, that was the target.
That was the budget target. Was 6.7% of GDP.
Deficit, yes.
Yeah, so my concern is that what we should be looking at as the real overrun above the target is between the 6.7 and the 12%. So let's look for the reason for that one. Because we have been made known that oh, this year we are going to overrun by 6.7.
But James,
but at the end,
let me caution you. Before the target was moved to 6.7
It was
half year,
it was 4.0
4.0
or 4.2, I think, if I remember.
So it moved from 4.0 to 6.7, and then outturn is 12.1, and so it is the outturn. So we know what happened.
Yeah, but assuming that at the end of the year, the minister said the overrun was exactly 6.7, we'll not have this agreement. It is because the overrun is now 12%. That is why we're having this argument. So my concern is that it is because it has overrun the expected overrun. That is why we have. So let's look for the reason for the difference of 5.3.
But
So yeah.
For example, when the government presented the budget, it projected a wage bill of 5.6. The government took credit for effective implementation of the single spine. They took credit.
For 5 years.
No, I'm coming, yeah. But 5 years starting from 2010. When they presented the wage bill, they said it would be 5.6. We said, you are underestimating. Oh, they said, no. It ended up being 7.5. Non-tax revenue. For the last 4 years, they've overestimated. You don't need to overestimate to come back and tell us we didn't reach it. This corporate tax matter you're talking about, the agreements gave them capital allowances. So it was known that they will not pay taxes. So when you come back and tell me, oh, corporate taxes fell by 7 and 8, I'm saying, but it is deja vu. It was not going to happen. Let us be transparent, deal with the facts, and see how to change it. Now, for me, going forward, how is the gap going to be closed? And that is what is not clear here. As you said, the government talked about this.
Revenue bills.
Revenue bills. But you see, the irony is that when we passed the Appropriations Act, and the specific measures are not there, it is hollow. So if you are going to come back to me later in May or June with revenue bills, the budget has a gap. So unless you are saying that those bills will be presented to us before we approve the Appropriations Act, then this thing that is not sufficient. Because if you tell me you are bringing a VAT bill, unless I pass the bill together with the Appropriations Act, nothing works. We cannot pass the Appropriations Act and later on pass the bills. It will be a problem. Because it says you want to reduce it from 12.1 to 9. So these bills should have been mentioned here so we know that. I mean, he mentioned a few things.
No, but the minister mentioned
stamp duty.
The minister mentioned the revenue bills.
No.
He's coming to the house with these revenue bills, with the details. Now, if these revenue bills come to the house, and there is an element of what probably additional revenue coming in terms of more taxation, if that is approved by Parliament, it's fulfilling the requirement, because Parliament is the body that approves what imposition of taxation.
So why couldn't he tell us that in the VAT bill, this is what we are proposing? Because you see here, vehicle income tax and tax stamp, we are going to increase it. He mentioned the levies and charges.
They are not going to increase this tax. They're saying that currently the tax is 15 cedis per quarter. And therefore,
listen,
if people are complaining that it's too much,
it is
they
only
have
fair
the
that
option. They have the option.
It is only fair that we adjust these rates that have not changed since 2005. What does that mean?
No, but it's not there. It's not yet. Nothing has been said here, so you can't conclude.
All I'm saying is
they have
that's the difficulty we have, that it would have been nice
To say we'll increase.
ab initio say, look, we think that on these matters we need to go up. Look, it is not for any reason that the fuel subsidies were adjusted. I think that water tariffs and utility electricity tariffs are going to go up. You don't hear it here.
I mean, do you think that these increases in taxes are the best solution for the moment?
Well, I have posted something different altogether. First of all, I think that one thing that I read in this budget statement is that we are going to try and bring in the informal sector and tax the informal sector a lot better. Yes, we've adjusted the tax bands so that there's a lot more free first 1,584 CDs is free, then the bands are adjusted accordingly. That is fine. I'm saying, and I've said all along, that one of the biggest challenges we have in this economy is that there are a lot more people who should be within the tax collection band who are not paying taxes. And that, I thought, is where government should spend its time and actually come out with some kind of rationale of how we are going to do this. And all I'm saying is this: if you take any informal sector person who is operating in this country today, and you do a quick back of the envelope calculation, I'll give you a typical example. Take taxi drivers who earn somewhere upwards of about 15 cedis a day in their pocket.
Yeah.
They make at the end of the month about 650 and 1,200 cedis a month. They don't pay a peso of taxes. They don't pay a single peso of taxes. Talk to any one of them. All the cost of the taxi falls onto the owner of the taxi. The insurance, the registration, everything else, all of that falls onto the owner of the taxi. The actual taxi driver who does that, his profit that he makes is not taxed. He's not the only person. All your coconut sellers, your carpenters, your people who are manufacturing coal pots and stuff on the wayside, your Agbogloshi people, every single one of them doesn't pay taxes. And I say it is not that I'm cheating them or I'm insisting that people who are low-income earners should pay taxes. I'm saying you have made provision for them because you have allowed a certain minimum bandwidth of free income. And say up until this threshold, you're not taxed. As your income increases, the tax burden gets heavier. So you have allowed for that, but you must apply that and collect those taxes. If government sits down and does that calculation, it will bring in anywhere between 2 and 3 billion cedis into the revenue coffers. And that's, for me, is where the crux of the solution
you're
is.
watching PM Express. My name is Stephen Anti, and I have Dr. Akotose, I have James Klutia-Veji, and I have Sydney Casely-Hayford. You can join us. Text 1760. Post your Facebook comments on our Facebook walls, facebook.com/Joy News. Or if you are on Twitter, you can send us a tweet at Joy News on TV. Let's take a look at excerpts of the budget statement presentation earlier today.
Mr. Speaker, we are resolved to tackle the main fiscal challenge, which is the budget deficit. The sources of the excess deficit of about 6% are known and quantifiable. They include shortfalls in corporate income taxes, notably from the petroleum sector, of about 708 million Ghana cedis, or 1% of GDP. Shortfalls in grants from development partners amounting to about 389.4 million Ghana cedis, or 0.5% of GDP. Implementation of the single spine salary structure, which has gone in excess of about 1.91 billion Ghana cedis, or 2.7% of GDP. Higher interest costs of 2.45 million as a result of the need to borrow to finance mainly unfunded capital projects, including the famous Gang of Four, Gang of Six. Higher spending on goods and services, which is already constrained by other expenditures, of about 354.7 million, or 0.5% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, we have enumerated this to show that we know the sources of the deficit and therefore can implement cogent plans to resolve them. As part of these corrective measures, in January 2013, the NPA announced an adjustment in petroleum prices to a reasonable level that is still below the full cost.
Well, that's the portion of the budget statement presentation where he virtually is conceding of these fiscal challenges. I think we have spoken extensively about this. Dr. Akotose, are there any more you'd like to say on this so that we'll move on?
One of the things that I would like for all of us to agree with is that I think, first and foremost, the Bank of Ghana and the Ministry of Finance should agree about the numbers. And I say it's important because where it comes to the payments, it goes to the Bank of Ghana. So if the Bank of Ghana tells us it's 12.1% deficit and the ministry says it's 12.0, the ministry cannot disagree with the Bank of Ghana, because unless you agree with the numbers, you don't know what the problem is. I can give you a few areas where they disagree, and I think it's not good. If non-tax revenue is 2.2, as the Bank of Ghana says, the ministry cannot say it's 2.8. Because you see, this is where the numbers differ. You are trying to save, move from 12.1 to 9%. That's not a small number. So if you say you're going to raise taxes, how much are you going to make there? We need to know the number. And that's why I'm saying that I don't know if the minister is hedging. My colleague says he's going to come with the tax bills. it will be important to know exactly what tax measures we are talking about to see how we can agree. This issue about the informal sector, no one disagrees. I also believe, for example, that efficiency in tax administration can yield enough revenue. I've always said that we can raise 30% more revenue, even on the in the informal sector than we are doing. We all know what is happening in the customs at the port. And I'm saying that unless we all come down and say, look, this is the way to go, it will be a problem. But one of the things that we are seeing, which we hope can change, is that if you borrow 7.1 billion from the domestic sources, you cannot bring interest rates down. The cost of credit to businesses who are supposed to be the engine of growth will remain high. Why is it that the Bank of Ghana maintains the policy rate at 15% and the T-bill rate is at 23%? In 1 year, from last year to this year, the T-bill rate has gone from 10% to 23%. You need to offer high rates for people to buy your bills and bonds. That is not sustainable. And people will say, well, you see, if you borrow for what I call, I mean, last year was an election year, and all of us must agree that there was some excess expenditures that go along with the election year. Some of those will not come in 2013. But the government must resolve that any ministry, department, or agency that exceeds its budget limit, there must be sanctions. If I were the Minister of Finance, I would look at the President in the eye and say, give me the authority to sanction, even your office, because you overspent 600 million. What for? Which agency in the office of the President is doing investment? Which agency? We need to know. Ministry of Youth and Sports, their budget officially approved was 54 million. Their excess expenditure is 300 million. Question, what did the Ministry of Youth and Sports spend money on? Stadia? I don't see any new stadia. Is it the trip to South Africa?
Honorable Kluche,
how much of it?
You want to react to that?
I want to react to what Doc is saying. I'm actually at a loss because I don't know where Doc is quoting the figures from. The minister did not give us any expenditure return that tells us this is an overspending of Office of the President, overspending of Minister of Youth and Sport. I wonder where he got the figures from.
Dr. Akotota, is it because, are you kind of gloating because the MPP tried to expose the deficit challenges in your True State of the Nation's address?
The government itself, if the minister will be truthful, the government itself has put this down on paper. The president is aware of these numbers I'm talking about. Take it from me. The Ministry of Finance has indicated, and this is why they say that their first option is to reduce the budget deficit from 12 to 9%. This is not, I mean, look, I'm a Ghanaian. If we are going this path, it affects all of us.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, when they bring the estimates, we are going to ask these questions of all those ministries, because I have here what we approve for them. And don't forget, these expenditures go through the ministry, the controller, and the Bank of Ghana. And that's why I say, for example, if the Bank of Ghana, which makes these payments, says it's 12.1%, it knows. This is not fiction. And that's why I'm saying, unfortunately, the minister did not raise these issues. He talks about challenges and over expenditure. The wage bill is only 1.9 billion out of 8.7 billion. Huh? 1.9, less than 2 billion.
So where did the rest go?
That is the
That's
question.
Your point.
And I'm saying that we know, the government knows, the president knows, that some ministries and at least 20 of them exceeded it without authorization. And that's where I define as indiscipline.
Just a point of correction again.
Yeah.
If you say the wage bill is only 1.9
billion excess.
That is excess. Sure. So the total wage bill is getting to 8 billion.
Yeah, but
the excess is the 1.9 billion.
I'm saying that when they brought the budget at 5.6 billion, that's what they expected. We told them that you are underestimating. That it will be more than 5.6. So tell us the true figure. So if you don't, then you come. And now they're telling us that 99.5% of workers are already on. Look, in the government's own documentation, the amount of arrears left is only 42 million. Most of it has been paid. So even if you spread over 5 years, I don't expect a lot more. You get me? So as for the wage bill, it will stabilize. Yes, I don't like the fact that we are spending over 70% of our tax revenue on wages. All of us must begin to ask, is this sustainable? But I'm saying that I'm not surprised that it went to 7.5 billion. Because we said so when they brought the budget in 2011, that let us know the true amount. Then if there's excess spending, you can deal with it. And in any case, the law is very clear. If you believe you're going to have excess expenditure, the law allows you to come back. You came back with a supplementary. We gave you an additional 2.
Yeah.
So altogether 21 billion. Then you end up spending 25.
Sydney, I mean, when you listen to this back and forth, which appears to be disagreement over figures, does it worry you perhaps that maybe the budget statement and other economic policies have not been too transparent, really? Is that how you feel about it?
Well, clinically, yes. There's very little transparency, or there's insufficient transparency, so that you can look at it analytically and from an independent point of view. But I welcome the banter. I welcome the banter with the NPP's point of view, with the NDC's point of view. Each one of them trying to explain and find the reasons, and it's good. But the thing is, the beauty about numbers is they tell a story.
Yeah.
And whichever way you twist and turn, your numbers will always lead you in the right direction. I can't understand that government will come back to me after a whole year and say that the single spine implementation overrun for so much. Because in 2012, they clearly stated that the challenges they had, which they would fix, was the single spine adjustment. And it was clearly written there in the budget. I mean, you can pull the document up and it's there. And so they budgeted for it. And if therefore the issue is that we under budgeted or we didn't realize that it was going to go so high, then I come back to you and I say, then you probably didn't know exactly how many people you had on your payroll.
Yeah.
And if you didn't know how many people you had on your payroll, then we are back to the issue of ghost names on the payroll, which we were told over and over and over and over that government had now got its arms around the ghost payroll issue. This was something that was said.
Setakwa raised the issue of biometric registration of civil servants and public workers and all of that.
For information, in the supplementary budget, they said they will make a savings of 500 million from ghost names.
Absolutely.
In the supplementary, that's
And
July.
that hasn't happened.
July 2012.
No, but you can't conclude that it doesn't happen.
Well, no.
Has that happened?
Yes, it did.
No,
it did happen.
it
When
didn't.
they were doing even the registration.
You made
of-
savings of 500?
No, when they were
$1
not to that extent, but when they were doing the registration of even the pensioners, and they went to various regions, there were a cut in the numbers of 30%, 25% on the people who were supposedly have to be on the payroll for these pensioners.
Yes.
Those savings were made.
Yeah, but
Now, so
the
if they
que-
move,
no,
if
the
they
issue
move
was
from
that
the
the
point is we
if they
expected
move
a
from the
savings
pensioners
of
from
500
to
All of
the
500 million, but we now told that we actually spent what we had in the budget and we overrun that spend.
No, but,
instead of making a
that, could be
savings.
the, that could be the net effect. It doesn't mean that there was no saving at all in terms of the biometric registration that went on with the pensioners.
Okay, you see,
there could be
honorable-
savings there, and there could be overspending, and the other side, and the net is what we have in the returns.
Honorable Affairs, you see, when I look at these numbers, I like to get away from the percentage issues because it tends to cloud the fact. Somebody should tell me the quantum, exactly how much was spent, all right, on single spine payments, exactly how much.
7.5 billion.
7.5 billion, and how much would you budget, did we plan?
5.6.
And so we overrun it. And the fact is, if you overrun it by that amount, or in excess of 1.9 billion,
Yes.
then clearly, I mean, 1.9 billion is a lot of money.
There's a
So
big
how
difference.
many,
7% of GDP.
how many more people and how much more inaccurate was the calculation of the single spine expenditures, which we were not aware of or was not disclosed throughout the 3.5 year cycle until we are now hearing at this time that we overrun by so much. I think that this is where the whole thing needs, we need a radical look at the way we are putting these numbers together,
Yes.
and how we are able to come back and compare what we said budgeted for line by line to exactly what we did, and as much as I don't want to say so, I agree with Akoto to that extent that let us now see each ministry by ministry who overspent and what did they spend it on, so we can actually sit back and say something went wrong in this particular arena and we can fix it. But this way, we don't have a clue.
Gentlemen, we have a couple of messages that are coming in.
To the minister. There's one statement he made which I liked. He said, we are going to put a freeze on new modules for the Geda.
Yeah.
And why do I agree? That program spent almost 700 million more than was budgeted for. So the minister is admitting that, look, there's a problem here. This is a type of statement that we can support. Yeah. So that in the end, we know, not that they are not good programs, but they must be budgeted for. So that statement was one of the few ones that I said, look, it's good that they're putting a freeze on the modules, because it has run amok. That's why I'm saying it is running faster than Usain Bolt. I mean, if your budget is 40 million, you spend 700 million. Clearly,
there's a problem.
You're breaking a record.
Right, gentlemen, I have a couple of messages coming in. Alhaji Mashood Boko says that the budget is full of hope, promising, and a true middle-income country budget. Who told you that the budget is of any help to Ghanaians? This is from Joe Braco House in Dunkwa. Thanks. And Alukus Tamale says that another key thematic area the finance minister fails to talk about was the nation's current and previous sovereign guarantees meant for the execution of infrastructure in the country. As for me, the budget can only be described as a menu for a restaurant. Said Thekbe must come again. I'll pause here and we'll take a quick break, and when we return, we'll take more of your messages. My name is Stephen Anti. Stay with us. Welcome back to PM Express. We're discussing the budget tonight, and it's been described as austere. Now, gentlemen, let's shift our discussion to more specific areas, other areas actually. The minister spoke about structural reforms of the medium-term agenda, and one of the things he spoke about was sustainability of government's wage bill. He says that, as indicated, the huge wage bill has crowded out the fiscal space for spending on critical social intervention. So to reverse that trend, they will put in place consistent with the white paper that is to be, the single spine is to be implemented over a 5-year period, he said that, and then the government will ensure that the single spine salary structure is an all-embracing government policy which will apply to all ministries. And then the wage adjustments in the public service and the current exercise on the rationalization and standardization of categories 2 and 3 allowances will be taken within budgetary constraints in the implementation period. And then there was talk about external factor, price and money, outlook for debt management. So let me not go into too much of the text that is here. Honorable Kluje Aveji, I'm sure you may have engaged the budget statement considerably, so that I don't want it to look like I'll pin you down on specifics, so that you tell me, are you satisfied that about the suggestions the minister has made in order to sustain government's wage bill?
Yeah, definitely. I am satisfied being in government and then also having a deficit of 12% in 2012. I'm satisfied that the minister is trying to reduce this deficit to 9%. And in order to do that, there are 2 or 3 options available to the minister. One, to increase revenue and maintain the level of expenditure. 2, to maintain the level of revenue and reduce expenditure. That's another option. And then the third one could be increase revenue and increase expenditure, but the rate of increase in revenue should be more than that of the expenditure. So these are options available to the minister. And the minister was clear that in order to reduce government spending, they have already started. In fact, even the subsidy that is being reduced to some extent is a way of saving some kind of expenditure from government and then going to serve as a revenue to government. So in a way, it's trying to balance that aspect of it. Then the second one is the revenue bill that the minister is going to bring to the House. That will tell us the specifics in order to ensure that all the corporate taxes that you say you're going to collect are done. So that is another area. Then the third one is the spread of the single spine implementation period over a 5-year period. That can also ease the pressure on the expenditure side. So I'm satisfied that Minister
But how
want to
significant
do
would
that.
this be? I'm still wondering how much it will ease things up, Dr. Sosa. You think that this 5-year
I'm saying that,
spread
look,
is something that we should bother our head with?
The minister's talking about the 5-year thing. We are talking about 2012, 2011, sorry, 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, and 2014. So he's saying we'll have an additional year of implementation. But they themselves are saying that 99.5% of all public sector employees are on the wage bill. And that's the one. Last time I checked, the quantum of arrears is only 42 million cedis out of a total of 7.5.
So why spread that
So
over 5
even
years, right?
the only thing that is left is they call the second and third category of allowances. That is not significant. The bulk of the implementation has occurred. So I don't see, I think the wage bill will stabilize around 7.58 billion. And the government has taken credit for implementing it. You know, we have given workers more money. So why are you saying that we didn't know that it was going to cost us this much? Having said that, look, the truth is that in 2012, there was a lot of excessive expenditure, some of it would naturally stabilize. You cannot spend too much money on politics forever. In election year, you do some, but how much of it? And that is where we must go to. And that's why I said that if we need to explain 6.5% of the excess expenditure. And the government itself knows that ministries and departments and agencies have overspent. Look, the situation is more depressing when you really begin to look at other liabilities of state-owned. VRA is old, BOST is old, TOR is old, NHI is old, DACF is old, Road Fund is old. If you put all of it together, you are talking about not 5 billion, but almost 8 billion in deficit. Now, 8 billion in commitment and arrears. 8 billion cedis, government borrowed 7 billion. So if you are looking at it, last year we borrowed just to pay salaries. Now, then you want to talk about all these the projects that you want to do. Where are you going to get the money from? Either you go back and borrow some more, which we have done 6 billion cedis a year for the last 4 years. Now, the effect is simple. I don't like interest rates at 30%. When inflation...
Nobody does.
When inflation, we are told, is 8%. The government's appetite we find a way to bring it down, to give some room for the private sector to go in and borrow. It does, see, the Bank of Ghana is in a fix. It's in a fix. It says inflation is at 8%. Then it puts the monetary policy rate at 15%, 7% over about inflation rate. Now, the T-bill rate is 23%. Ask yourself in Ghana, how many projects can you engage yourself in that will bring a return of 23% to pay back your bill? If I were a private person, like the Europeans are doing now, they are happy putting their money in our T-bills. Why not? It is not good for business.
Not good for
so
business.
We have to find a way. But the government the Bank of Ghana needs help from the fiscal to ease the pressure. Let's look for efficiencies. I think that it is true that we can raise revenue by attacking the informal sector a bit.
Like Case Leher
I think that we can also save money from excessive expenditure from ministries. There's no question about that.
Case Leher, tell me, do you think that we, as a country, does it look like we have money to survive the next 4 years?
Oh, yes, we have. Yes, we have. You see, I disagree with anybody who looks at Ghana and says that we don't have the resources and we don't have the cash to do what we want to do. Look, we need a lot of infrastructure development. We need a lot of change in our environment. We need so much that we need to do it, and all of it costs money. The maintenance of the roads, just to keep ourselves at a level where we can boast and say we are a lower middle income economy, is a lot of expenditure. What we are doing wrong is we are making political decisions to influence economic development, all right? You must do it anyway, but you must make the right choices in order to be able to meet your obligations and to develop the country. So your task is not to scale back your infrastructure development and growth, but it is to look at opportunities, new markets, and new ways of gathering more revenue so you can meet it. If you take a typical company, if this is a company and I'm running it, and I suddenly reach a point where I say, hold on a minute, I want to do all this capital expenditure, my new office building, the way I'm going to buy furniture, my travel expenses, my acquisition of new properties in different countries. I want to do all of these things, but I don't have enough money. What are my options? I look for new markets. I look for new products, I look for new services, and I try and see how I can bring in more money so I can meet my obligations. The minute I say, hold on, I can't do it because I only have 200 million a year, and that is all I can I have, and so I should only afford that.
You're
you start
stifling
shrinking
yourself.
your business and you're stifling
So
your
you
growth.
don't think that we are heading towards HIPIC, are you?
No, I don't think
So
so.
this is a very
I heard
this is a very thorny one. So let me hear what you think. Let me hear what you think.
What is the prescription for HIPIC?
Let me hear what you think is there.
I say that we are not there because the opportunity for us to fix the problem we have is available.
It's available.
When in the time when we actually had to go HIPIC, no oil income, no opportunities for development, we were still depending on cocoa, gold, and all the traditional products, and there was no light in the future.
But
we had no choice than to go that and to borrow money to shore
all
up.
your oil revenue is already tied in.
Yeah, but
now-
I have opportunity. I have
Where?
new fields being discovered. I have new gas coming up.
But
I have
you-
new
There are
things
6
that
new
I'm going to
fields
do.
You know,
discovered last year.
no, the interesting is that you have new fields being discovered, but you are projecting that your production for oil next year will average 83,000 barrels a day.
No,
Yes.
Less than.
No, it's better you project that level and you go beyond that.
So, Doctor, you think we are in
if you
HIPIC?
project
We're there already.
130,000, you don't-
I'm saying
See,
that- I'm saying that
the reason why I
in
disagree with
2001,
Akutu, the reason why I disagree with
2001,
Kutu is that when you do these things, you are looking at debt
Well,
sustainability.
gentlemen,
and
gentlemen,
you are
I'll
looking
have to
at
pause
hope
you
for
there.
the future.
We're
So you
getting
don't go
breaking
HIPIC when
news.
there's hope
We're
coming.
getting breaking news coming in. Gentlemen, I'll pause you a bit. We're getting breaking news coming in now that Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez is dead. We'll bring you details in our news bulletins later on in the day. Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez has passed on. Details are still sketchy, and then we'll give you more details when during our subsequent bulletins in the day. So let's wrap up. We're behind. We're almost.
I think that was one
we'll be
point
on time,
that Mr. Hayford raised, and I'm happy with that. In fact, this is something that we should take as a nation, and all of us to discuss it.
The fact that we are not in HIPIC.
No, not the
to
HIPIC at all. In terms of more revenue sources,
Yeah.
the analysis that he made about the taxi driver, there are a lot of such people in the system who are not paying taxes.
I agree.
So, if any government, be my government or any other government, that should come out boldly and say, let's confront this, and then make. I think that we should not play politics with it. Once we do that, then we are heading towards a system where we can make sure that anyone who earns income in Ghana, any income received in Ghana, brought into Ghana, and generated in Ghana, pay the appropriate
Must pay
tax.
the appropriate tax. Even if you're going to pay 5 CDs, you must
pay.
it.
And I think this is where I agree with my colleague.
Yeah.
This issue about informal taxes. Look, the carpenter or the brick layer that builds houses, you'll be surprised, may earn more money than you and I, because he or she is working for about 10 different people.
Yes. And collecting
And,
cash.
and collect cash and it's not
Absolutely.
taxed.
Yeah.
It's only fair that we look at them. And that can, because now it's only the formal people who are paying all the taxes. And we can't go on forever. But we should agree that we should not politicize it. And especially because if you are social democratic, you think that those are your people. And when I talk about it, you may say, oh, you don't like
No, but it doesn't matter. If those are our people.
You've said it all. I mean, we should
Definitely, the
agree
little
not
taxes that are
to
supposed to be, they must pay.
politicize it.
No,
And,
so I hear, let's agree that whether you are social democratic or liberal or center of the right, we will let
property owning.
Well, our time is up, but
only democracy,
I will
yes.
have to wrap up on the text messages that came in earlier. Belly ache MPP MPs. Today, because it's about money, no boycott. Shame. The Supreme Court will uproot your task. That is from Atta Takradi. And Nelson from Bole says, congratulations to all parliamentarians who took part in today's budget that's presented on behalf of the president. Ghana is now moving forward in the right direction. And Stephen, I'm surprised at the Honorable MP. Does the style of presentation really matter as far as development is concerned? This is from Joe Banye from WA. And Steve, to be honest with you, this budget is the best so far. This is from Opoku Jesse Draboso. And then Christian Abuaji, New Edubiase Senior High School says, I'm very sure that at the end of 60 days, all party members will know the good or bad of the Electoral Commission. I'm sorry, we're not discussing Electoral Commission. We'll wrap up here. So, Dr. Akutose, you heard the gentleman who was making reference to no boycotts. Are you going to boycott the debate?
No, but I think people do not understand the essence of what happened today. Look, Parliament has an oversight responsibility over the executive. I said at the beginning that I am worried about the breach of the Constitution in terms of exceeding the Appropriations Act. The budget ends up in what we call an Appropriation Act, which is a law. As a legislator, I cannot say that I'm not going to participate in something that will become a law binding on me. And that is why I'm worried that if I have proved a certain amount and government has exceeded it, I have to question the government. And by the way, the person who talks about they give us money for budget, I think they are being misled. Unfortunately, some new parliamentarians, I won't mention their names, think that they don't propagandist.
All right, gentlemen, it's great to have you here.
It does not help the credibility of the
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Akutose is MPP spokesperson on finance, is MP for Old Tafo Pankrono, and James Kluche Avedi is chairman of the Finance Committee of Parliament. He's an NDC MP for K2 South. K2 North, I beg your pardon. And Sydney Casely Hayford is a financial analyst, and I am Stephen Anti. Thanks to you for sending all your messages and texts. Join us again tomorrow for another engaging edition of PM Express. Good night.